Good evening, students. I'm sitting here in my kitchen and I am listening to it sleet outside, so it's probably a good thing that we aren't in class. One of the main components of tonight's class was to be a discussion of the Alabama course of study for science. And in the instructions that I've sent you the link to the Alabama Learning Exchange, or ALEX for short. And the document I'm looking at is the complete Alabama course of study, which is a small square just to the right of all of the choices that you can see for the individual courses. Please know, and I am very glad to say, we are in the very last days of this course of study. A new course of study has been developed. I think that it will be released for public review probably while we're still in this course, and that would be a great thing for us. And it will probably be enforced for the first time in 15-16. So if you teach in the next school year 2014-15, you will still be under this course of study. And of course, Dana, you teach under this course of study right now. I just want to go through a few things about the course of study and call your attention to those. First of all, you'll find that it's a document that says that it was published in 2005-06, but there were no changes to this course of study from the 2001 course of study. So we're looking at very old standards here. Here are the table of contents, and I just want to point out a few things that we're going to be looking at. The conceptual framework, I would say would be fairly important, but I don't care so much about this conceptual framework. You'll notice it's like 2 pages long, and you notice that we have a whole textbook that we're studying for the conceptual framework for the next generation science standards. So I really want us to focus on the new conceptual framework for the new science standards, but these standards did have a conceptual framework as well. I'm going to stop at page 10 when I get there, because this week, of course, you were to do a presentation on the science practices from the next generation science standards, and I just want to call your attention to the science processes that are valued in this course of study. We will then stop on page 11 to look at what the current requirements are for students in Alabama high schools as far as science is concerned in order to receive a diploma, and talk a little about the anticipated changes to that. And then we will actually go in and look at the actual standards for grade levels or for specific subjects. So I am going to just kind of go through the document so you can see. Here's the preface. Here are all the people who served on the committee. Then you will see an introduction, and of course the goal of this science course of study, and our goal still today, is obviously science literacy for our students. Then, as I spoke before, here is that conceptual framework. I will stop for just a moment because I do like this particular diagram, and this was kind of the overarching guide to the development of this course of study. And of course what you see here is our world, and science is a way for us to look at and understand the earth, the world, and the universe in which we live. When you look at this document, and if you especially look at the K through 5 pieces and obviously the 6 through 8, you will see there is equal attention given to the 3 disciplines of science: life science, physical science, and earth and space science. And I just want to say that when we move to the disciplinary core ideas of the next generation science standards, you're going to see that those 3 levels, those 3 disciplines of science are equally valued as well. But as you look at here, what you see, the thing that connects all of those together are process and application skills. And of course, this is somewhat akin to the fact that we have process the science practice standards in the next generation science standards that are to permeate all the courses as well. So you will hear me do a lot of complaining about this course of study, but I must say I'm fairly fond of this overarching conceptual framework. Here are some position statements about lab emphasis, writing, and safety, and we will discuss safety a little bit later on in the course. Technology, and of course the 5E instructional model. And I will address this at some point in class. This is a very good instructional model. It was actually developed by the Biological Science Curriculum Study in Colorado by Roger Bybee, and you can see him down here, and he actually is one of the persons who's been a lead worker on the next generation science standards. And then of course it talks about assessment, diversity. Here's what I want to pay attention to. I hope that you will look at page 10. Now, there is a problem with the fact that this page is on page 10, and then the standards for all of the courses are on subsequent pages in the document. Unfortunately, because the skills portion was separated out and not specifically addressed in the content standards of each discipline, I fear that there's been a lot of loss in the science teaching as far as the skill practices. But if you look on the left, in the first section here, it talks about the basic science skills: observing, communicating, classifying, measuring, predicting, and inferring. And I think that you would agree that those are not so different from the 7 practices that we're going to look at in the next generation science standards. There is some annotation over here to the right of each one of them to talk about what they mean by that particular skill. Then the more advanced skills, of course, are those that go about planning and doing experimentation and making use of the data, controlling the variables, defining operationally, formulating hypotheses, doing controlled experiments, and analyzing data. So these are the science practices that were valued in this course of study. I hope that you see these science practices being attended to as you do your clinical work out in the field. My feeling is, being a former science supervisor, working with A+ College Ready, where I looked at what science teachers did all the time, as well as in my current job, I fear, especially in the upper grades, that we do not spend enough time on the process and application skills. And as you begin your career as a science teacher, I hope that one of the things that you will commit yourself to is that your students will do science versus just learning about the history of science, as we talked last week. I really don't have a problem with these lists of skills. As a matter of fact, if a teacher paid a lot of attention to making sure that these were incorporated into his or her classroom, I would be very proud, for my granddaughter to be a student in that class. The next page tells you what you're looking at when you look at the standards, which we're about to do. The first thing we have is a performance expectation. For example, in this particular one, students will describe effects of forces on objects, including change of speed, direction, and position. Students, that is the standard. But then the course of study gives us some more information about that standard. For example, we see under this particular standard, define solution in terms of solute and solvent. That is the standard. But we have some descriptors under there that tell us content that is directly related to the standard and that is required. For example, they want us to define diffusion and osmosis, define isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic, and describe acids and bases. So while we're talking about solute and solvent, and by the way, they say define, which of course is a very low-level verb in terms of Bloom's taxonomy. These are also the things that students should know. And finally, some standards even have further clarification. If you look down at example 3, there are some examples. For example, this standard distinguished between monocots and dicots, angiosperms and gymnosperms, and vascular and non-vascular plants. And then, of course, we have the bullets that tell us the required content, describing the histology of roots, stems, leaves, and flowers, and recognizing chemical and physical adaptations of plants. Well, which physical and chemical adaptation of plants are you specifically talking about? And so they give some examples that we want to pay attention to. Now, it's interesting that this is a biology example, and of course, in our formal life in Alabama, the Alabama High School graduation exam was totally based on biology. And I can tell you from being a biology teacher in this state, I wanted to be certain that my students knew those examples because those are the ones that were going to show up on the standardized test. Well, those days are over, and that specificity no longer, I think, is required as we teach these standards. However, it does give us more information about the standards that we are to teach. Now we get into the actual standards themselves, and they're presented in grade bands. For example, here's the kindergarten through second grade overview, and then following that are the kindergarten standards. And just FYI, please notice that in the elementary standards, there's always some physical science standards, some life science standards, and some earth space science standards. Here are the first grade standards. Notice physical, life, earth, space. Second grade standards. Then we come to the 3-5 band. And please notice that we're getting more standards here. The fourth grade band, the fourth grade standards, and the fifth grade standards. Then we get to the middle school standards, and I want to stop here for just a moment because what you'll see here is an overview regarding the standards, and then you will see the sixth grade standards on earth science, which is what we teach in sixth grade here in Alabama, the seventh grade standards, which are life science standards, and of course the 8th grade standards, which are physical science. Now, some of you have chosen these courses as your course of focus for this course. So in a moment I'm going to describe what I want you to do with these courses of study, but I just want to be certain that you know where these courses of study are. Then of course we get through the 9 through 12 overview. So the first thing you can see in the overview is a description of what is required for a student to graduate from Alabama High School. And pre-service teachers, to be honest with you, this is true for students who are in school right now in grades 10, 11, and 12. And it's pretty much also true for the 9th graders. But just to make it very clear, every student in the state of Alabama is required to take biology. Now, I will just tell you, in my teaching history, that used to be a 10th grade course, but it's now been changed to a 9th grade course in most every school because of the graduation exam, and of course that does not exist anymore. Every student in the state of Alabama has to take a course from the physical science core. Now, there are 3 courses that meet that criteria. Students could take physical science, could take physics, or could take chemistry. And then they are to take 2 other science courses for a total of 4 courses. So they must take 4 courses during their course. Now, there are some courses that meet the Advanced Academic Diploma endorsement, and that endorsement will still be available for our kids in 10, 11, and 12. However, beginning with our current 9th graders, there will be only one diploma option. There will no longer be a diploma option with the Advanced Academic endorsement. And then when we get into here is the course of study for high school physical science, not 8th grade. Here's the course of study for biology. Here is the course of study for chemistry. And following that are physics, and of course, Dana, you know the anatomy and physiology is past that as well. Now, students, here is what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to study the course of study for the course that you have chosen to work with during this semester. I want you to read all of the standards, all of the required content, and all of the example. And then I want you to choose a standard, or more likely more than one standard, that go together and that would fit into a unit. Okay? So between now and next week, I want you to study your course of study, and I want you to tell me what are the standards that are going to be addressed in the unit that you want to plan from the course you selected during this semester. So here's a couple of ways to think about it. First of all, you might say, okay, I want to choose something that I know a lot about, and that's certainly one way to look at it. Or you might say, I really would like to choose something that I don't know a lot about, and I would like to learn a lot about that. That would be another way to look at it. Just think about, you're going to want to do something that you're going to need to have about 8 days of classroom instruction. So you're going to need to have standards that go that will last through 8 days of instruction. So please bear that in mind when you're choosing your standard or standards. Please remember that one of these standards is not a one-day lesson. As a matter of fact, there are some of these standards. For example, let me just go back to biology. That's the course of study I know best. And let me just find one here that I'm looking for. Yeah, number 3, identify reactants and products associated with photosynthesis and cellular respiration and the purposes of these two processes. If that was going to be what I was going to choose, that would be the only standard that I would choose. It will take me at least 8 days in class to really teach photosynthesis and respiration, to do the labs associated with it, to do the classroom exercises I want to do associated with it. So I might choose just that one standard to work on. Otherwise, there might be some others that I might choose to do 2 standards or more. Okay? So, your task, to reiterate, study the course of study for the course that you have chosen. Think about, what unit do I want to do from this course of study? And then I want you to select a standard or 2 that would define that unit and choose those. And once you do that, I want you to email those to me. If you have any questions, of course, you can contact me.